Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to have you here. I'm Tom Collins. I'm the director of the Pérez Art Museum Miami, and it's a real pleasure to introduce this program we're offering in conjunction with the opening of the exhibition Jardim Botânico. I am going to be turning things over in a moment to the artist, Beatriz Milhazes, and to Tobias Ostrander. Tobias is the Deputy Director for Curatorial Affairs here at the museum and worked for several years with the artist to put together this first North American survey of her work. And I want to say on behalf of everyone associated with the museum, we are extremely proud to be offering this show and very pleased that the artist is here with us today. So will you join me in welcoming her? This is also a nice opportunity to do something that is a little difficult to do in the ebb and flow of what happens here at the museum, and that is to acknowledge a handful of people and institutions that have helped make this possible. Try to imagine what it means to pull together work from all over the world to present an exhibition like this, and publications and public programs. We have two presenting sponsors that have been fantastic, and I want to acknowledge them. First, Itaú, and in particular, Frances Aldrich Sevilla Sacasa, who I don't think she is here today, but has been a great partner in helping us secure presenting sponsorship for this show, as well Graph Diamonds. And I don't need to say anything about Graph Diamonds to most people in Miami. You know Graph Diamonds. I also want to acknowledge that the Consulate General of Brazil here in Miami has been a partner in putting together our programs and in securing additional support for this exhibition. And then 4 galleries that represent Beatriz around the world. That's Galleria Fortes Vilaça in São Paulo, Stephen Friedman Gallery in London, James Cohen Gallery in New York, and Gallery Max Hetzler in Berlin. And finally, because I know some of them are here today, I want those of you who don't have the pleasure to live every day with a work of art made by Beatriz Milhazes, we have some lenders to the exhibition here today. So you have to try to imagine what it means to give up a piece that is this wonderful for the duration of an exhibition like this one. So I want to thank all of the lenders to this show for helping make it possible. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tobias.
Well, thank you all for coming today. It's great to see so many people here. Beatriz and I are going to talk through some of the works in the exhibition and some of the references and inspiration for some of her work. One of the things both she and I are, we always find it strange in this moment where the paintings are over there and we're going to be looking at them in reproduction, which is always sort of strange and frustrating, but this is a way that we can all look at it at the same time together. But one of the things that I find most unique about Beatriz's work is the way that the difference between how it looks in reproduction and how it feels in the flesh. And of course that's true of all painting, but there's a particular shift and kind of surprise when you see the paintings in person, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're going to look at some images together, and I wanted to just introduce my concept as a curator, or my choice of the title, Jardim Botânico, and hint at sort of the structure behind the exhibition. I've known Beatriz a long time. We met in 1998, and I've visited her studio, multiple times over the years, and really followed its many developments, and it continues to change and grow, and a survey show is such an interesting opportunity to really look at a long period of time. I mean, we're looking at over 25 years of production, and to see how the work has changed and stayed the same, and evolved in various ways. And one of the thves about this show is I organized it more or less chronologically. Each of the rooms in the exhibition have kind of solid blocks of time that are represented, but then there are some twists in that linearity on purpose, because Beatrice's work is never just linear. She continually returns to certain themes in new ways. But the title Jardim Botânico, and we're looking at an image of Jardim Botânico in Rio de Janeiro. This is the botanical garden of the city of Rio. And this botanical garden is very close to Beatrice's studio. And Beatrice has had the same studio since 1987. And I use one use of the title Jardim Botânico is to really talk about how place, not only Brazil culturally, but also the neighborhood, the textures and richness of everyday life in Rio continually has informed her work. And the other use of the term botanico, Jardim Botânico, is more metaphorical. The idea that a botanical garden is a sensual space. It's a space where you go to be immersed in the colors and textures of nature. But it's also an analytical space. Traditionally, botanical gardens are tied to a history of medicinal gardens. They're places of observation, study, and analysis. And in a similar way, Beatrice's work really creates immersive spaces for the viewer to enter, but they're also very analytical, very thoughtful spaces. So there's always this balance in her work between sensuality and emotion and rationality and analysis, and I want to talk about that together. So we'll go through a few works and think also chronologically, and talk a little bit about some of the influences at different periods in the development of the paintings. So this is the show begins.
I like that he says that.
Well, tell us about this painting. This is an early painting.
So good afternoon. So I'm very glad that you all come to this talk, and I hope you really enjoy seeing the show and start a dialogue with the works, with the ones that haven't seen yet. So no, I think you can go ahead.
Okay.
Ask me questions.
Well, I think maybe one way we should begin. I started the exhibition with works from the early 90s, because that was shortly after she really started to develop her signature painting technique. So maybe we could introduce a little bit of how your technique developed and how you use it.
Yeah, until '89, I always used to work on the paintings. Like technically, I used the collages. So I used to glue fabric and sometimes paper in my work since when I started developing my own language in '83. So it's like 31 years ago. And so since this period until '89, I always work with the concepts or the ideas about collage. Also using paint too. But that became a kind of a limited for me in terms of the plasticity that I wanted to see in my paintings. And also, like, I wanted to develop, because when you work with existing materials, you cannot really have your own elements, motifs, painted. And so experimenting, like he was talking about the scientific part of the botanic garden. So it's like, I think artists many times has a process that's very similar with scientists. And then we experiment like based on a monotype print process. I discover this technique that is based on a transfer. So it's difficult, you don't think you understand how it works, but it's basically, I have a plastic sheet, so I have the drawing made, so I painted on the other side, and then I can have like different kinds of motifs, elements, and done and then make with painting, and then afterwards glue it on canvas. And when it's dry, I can peel off this plastic sheet, clear plastic sheet, and then the image stay. So that moment was really important. Happens in '89. This painting, that happened in '89, and for different reasons, was a very big door open to my to the future developing of my paintings. Why? First, so there are first thing, I could finally use only paint, because also I was interested in just being concentrated in just materials, so use only paint and develop my own elements, motifs, shapes, without being limited to the existing ones. The second thing, like this technique allowed me to keep the intensity of the colors, because in the way is a plastic sheet doesn't absorb any paint, so you can keep exactly the color you have done. Also, you can, for the metallics, if you notice, like some of the golds, people think it's gold leaf. It's not gold leaf, it's all acrylic paint, but it's also because of this technical process that allowed me to keep this kind of a quality. Another thing is like I can move on in the way it's separated pieces. I can move on canvas before I really glue it, what also helps me a lot for the layering process too. And in the general thing, I could keep the concepts of the collages process and also use only paint and not anymore other materials. So.
I mean, one of the things that this transfer, it's kind of like she creates, think of like a decal or a sticker out of paint. So when she rips off sort of the back of this, sometimes bits of the paint stay on the acrylic sheet. And that's how you get these very kind of irregular, kind of textured surfaces to the painting. So they become very imperfect in a way, which there are these kind of very nice accidents, which she now can control.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
At the same time, like I love paint, of course, but like I never liked myself leaving my brush stroke marks onto the canvas. So, and that it was very important because I could make it painting and then a kind of hiding, or maybe it's like I don't know. Is there, but it's like everything became a smooth surface rather than this kind of a texture that the brush struck, or volume, physical volume of the painting onto the canvas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the early imagery. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
This painting from '93, you know, much of her work in the '90s, there was a lot of Baroque influences, a lot of influences of. She mentioned prior to this, she worked a lot with textiles, but here we see kind of references to textiles, but also the gold of Baroque and some of the forms of Baroque. Could you talk a little bit about what drew you to these imagery, maybe a little bit about some of the religious imagery that you used too?
Yeah, I think it is the first room in this show, if you can put like that. So it's, except for one painting that's from 2001, it could shows like I have some more Spanish, like a kind of interest in the whole imagery by that time, and it's like from the Catholic Church architecture, Catholic, Baroque, different kinds of development, and also the like a feminine, like women costumes, like some of these ruffles, like you could see especially in a paint like that. It was picked up from these kind of 17th, 18th century women costumes. So my imagery came from different points, but more connected to the Spanish cultural history than to my own one, that's Portuguese and background in Brazil. So.
What's interesting here at the center of the painting, this shape is very much kind of referencing sort of like virgin forms from colonial painting.
Yeah. At the same time, in a way, like all these elements that came up in my work that I try to put all together. So the geometry is the way I think I make it happen successfully, at least for me. So it's like, so the circle, so even they have a more strong reference, a figurative reference until maybe 97, 98, they were abstract in terms of results, in terms of composition result.
Tell us a little bit. I mean, you continually talk about Tarsila Amaral as a reference. Can you talk a little bit about her and what specifically you take from her as an example? You know.
Yeah, I think I have like my mother is an art historian teacher at the Rio University, and so Rio State University. So so we grew up. So my father is a lawyer, but he always we had at home during a time that it was I grew up during the dictatorial time, but so it was
during the dictatorship in Brazil.
Dictatorship in Brazil. So and then so it was very difficult for us to have kind of a normal life. And so at home I had all the information in terms of culture in general, in different kind of skills that was missing in school by that time. So the modernism, so the Brazilian modernism, it was something that, so seeing like figures, very important figures like Tarsila do Amaral, Anita Malfatti, at home, it was something I grew up seeing it. When I start developing my own language, I felt very connected with this modernism anthropophagy statement. Anthropophagic.
Yes, it would. Anthropophagic. Tarsila Amaral, her husband Osvaldo Andrade did a manifesto about the anthropophagy, where he talks about cultural cannibalism. He was really encouraging artists, visual artists, poets, cultural producers to really digest foreign influences to create like a new, healthy kind of Brazilian body. And it's a very early example, kind of a thinking about post-modernity, where you're mixing many different things together. It's a very fascinating idea, and it sort of takes the kind of mixings that happen in Brazil to like a higher kind of theoretical level, and so you can see that in your work, that the way that you approach the mixing.
Yeah, it was like I had these interests, some interests like that comes from life, and many times from me as a person. At the same time, I had the painting, and painting has its own context, interest, developing, statement, history, and then we needed to listen it. In these combinations of your interest in life and the interest on paintings, it's something that's not sometimes easy or clear, especially when you're starting making your own, developing your own language. So the modernism was a good, fantastic reference for me, especially on that the figure of Tarsila do Amaral, because she was a painter that she was a student of Leger in Paris, And then when she went back to Brazil, and then she exactly wanted to make a link. So living in São Paulo, by that time, she's trying to develop her own languages, how to make these two words. Put all of those together. But more recently, actually, I participated in a talk last year in London, and with the director of the V&A Museum, and then he introduced something that I thought is very interesting, because this statement about the modernism is like a culture eating culture, and then it was based like us from South America eating European eating South America, but actually based on idea that we have our own culture that would be has a very clean roots. And then he was pointing at something that I thought very interesting, that actually our culture is already anthropophagic, so we don't have this clean. So he was asking me, what do you say, like, when you think your own culture? And then I said, no, my own culture. Your own culture is already, especially in Brazil, very mixed. So it's already anthropophagic. You don't need it to go. What is a very interesting thing. And then actually, it's more about, I was thinking about it, and that's talking about Jardim Botânico. I said, like, it maybe is more about where we live, our context, like experiencing things. Like, of course, if I have my studio next to Botanic Garden in Rio de Janeiro, a tropical environment with a strong nature that is part of my daily life, with the heater every day. And so these, I cannot thinking exactly the same as an art that is in like in Paris, in a very gray context, like with a very heavy winter almost the year. And then so we should all have an international concept and develop international statements or concepts, but we definitely has different experience, in our roots and background. And that's actually talk about seeing the works in the flesh is very important, because this experience you could not avoid, and will be different for everybody after that. The ones that haven't seen, or the ones that knew already, after seeing all together in the flesh. I don't know, make sense?
Yeah.
You understand? No, sorry, because my English, sometimes I start talking and say, if you understand what I'm saying.
I think just to kind of reiterate, I think what's the idea of Tarsila is more like a structural model. How Tarsila she doesn't necessarily reference Tarsila's imagery, but Tarsila is a great example of someone who is really kind of taking European or taking multiple references and really kind of looking and validating, the Brazilian countryside, the African traditions in Brazil, and you see a similar approach, and that's why I go to this work. There are references that are particularly kind of coming from popular or like applied arts from Brazil, correct? Like as well, like from the countryside.
From the countryside, exactly. Yeah. So you could see in this one and the next one, maybe you can also move to. So this is a painting actually that belongs to the Guggenheim collection. You can see like just an example, like some imagery, like in this, as I use as a reference to my work. So from jewelry. So before applied art makes a big role in my own imagery, like Tobias
decorative arts, applied arts.
Yeah. So folk art, primitive, tribals. So I always use it and had the interest to use. It's something that I love, particularly myself, and then I wanted to use it in my painting. So, but then this is a good example, like when from a jewelry design to like the grilled like iron work.
Yeah, we're kind of looking at these kind of black flat shapes.
Yeah, and so arabesques from some iron works and also from the Baroque references to like crochet, like this kind of a handmade, human weaving thing. Mm-hmm. Also, actually, this has a reference on the crochet in another like tribal. Like you have a tribe like Cajuvel is a Brazilian tribe that the women normally use to make this kind of a drawings, like a kind of a dark lines drawings over their faces. And then these drawings also inspire me to develop my own ones, because these ones, so in my paintings, even I have sometimes strong reference, I always develop my own thing from that point, because is when painting enter, no? So whatever kind of things you want to develop, when you enter in the studio is something that you needed to preserve, and you needed to listen and talk with your own work, and the world outside should be living there, no? So this is what make, so every time I try to really copy or really like use and make drawings, observe something objectively, never work when I try to place it on canvas.
So it's more like this kind of, it's real abstraction where she's sort of like mixing all these references together.
Exactly. And then in a way it became completely, it should be, I think all paintings are abstract. That's my own thing in general, not only me, but I think because it's all something that's not, if you don't think abstractly, it never will work. It never will resolve your composition. So it's like I love portraits, I love still lifes, but they are all abstract works on my, it's my private.
Tell us about Matisse and how you found sort of an ally or a partner in Matisse.
Well, Matisse is like the most strong thing is this kind of one is like he always kept saying like he wants to make paintings that talk about life, this cross between art and life, and also the use of the decorative art and the applied art as a reference to construction. It is his word. So about colors, so my colors in the earlier works were more melancholic, I think. When I start having survey shows like the one we have here, I started re-seeing, seeing again my earlier works in the context sometimes that has a room with only the 90s work, for example, and I could feel how it is, the color have changed along all those years. And Matisse, of course, is the important cross is also color interest.
The kind of his use of arabesques have an interesting dialogue with your work, and the kind of the flatness of his paintings are very much, you see a dialogue.
The composition has this kind of flatness,
I always loved this painting, the year we lived dangerously, and the translation as an example of how Beatriz really sort of pushes her paintings almost to the point of where they can't be read anymore. Sometimes they're built up and so dense. And she talked about this painting as a painting that she almost sort of lost and then kind of brought back through a series of editing and kind of pasting.
Yeah, my work is a lot of process. It's a lot about process. So I don't make sketch, neither for the paintings, collages, or prints. And so I only did one project, especially for the Fundação Bayer in Basel, when I had a show in 2011 that was about the Four Seasons, and then these paint I needed to do sketch, but it was the first time because I had a team, and the team I needed to be loyal to it. So, but then and then this moment introduced in my work this possibility of sometimes making sketch. What it was a great arrival in my process. But then it's about of process. So this page is a very good example, like when I had almost finished one composition, and then I start looking and start losing power and power and power. So I decide to enter again and start canceling. It's kind of a very almost expressionist way of working, and but actually based on a very rational decision. Then instead of canceling with brush strokes or just like a solid areas, solid colors areas, I cancel it with this big drawing of arabesques drawing, like the silver one. So the arabesque started building up another possibility of construction, this composition, and instead of cancel with only a solid color, so I build up with another possibility and open up for a completely different experience in terms of results, final result.
I mean, if you look at this painting in the galleries, like the center, this sort of is incredibly dense. Like it's just so many layers, and but then you talked about
and has this wash yellow.
Yeah, you kind of washed it out, and then sort of put and then if you look carefully at the painting, the white side is actually, it's a transfer that's been kind of layered on top of it. So you can start to see the kind of editing, pruning process you do there. It's a great painting. And then let's talk a little bit about kind of the pop influences and kind of move into some of the more tropicalist interests. But here, this is probably the most kind of pop art inspired or closest to pop art, North American pop art there is in the show. But tell us a little bit about those references for you.
Yeah, I think from the 99 until like the first years of the 2000s. So I start being more interested in looking for the pop culture in general, and not just about something that comes from this primitive, like I told you before, but actually some pop reference, some signs, symbols that represent some also historical moments, like the peace and love sign, and together. So the circle that before were like this crochet, if we want to call, or Cadjuvel circle, it like how say, get fat. Got a more graphic and large, lasery kind of imagery. Some others became targets, like the one in this painting. So the arabesques start being more graphic too, and I add like a heart sign, peace and love sign, stars. So and together, of course, the colors start being much more brighter and solid.
Yeah, and it's sort of the color and the kind of the flat graphics of them sort of kind of remind me more of like the kind of angling and the diagonals that are in these paintings remind me of, kind of how pop art was looking at cartoons, advertising, merchandising for inspiration. And I know, not necessarily these paintings, but sort of you often look at kind of packaging or the kind of the intense colors that you see in kind of contemporary graphic design,
Yeah. No, definitely it was like the introduction of kind of intensity.
I mean, here I sort of want to start introducing kind of this your kind of reference to kind of pop, or is a very tropicalist pop. You know, it's always kind of there's a lot of references to kind of psychedelica, you know, the 60s, the 70s, and you know, maybe you could talk a little bit about what drew you to that. You know?
Yeah, sometimes I always like say like people like them conceptually. I feel connected with different things that stimulate me as an artist, stimulate me to be an artist and go to the studio, and so it's so I didn't live by the psychedelic time, but I always felt connected with these ideas, as the same as the carnival, like the carnival, especially the Rio parade carnival. That is since I was a child, like it excites me to this exuberance, wideness. Like all the exagere, no, that's access, the way the freedom to the way like they develop all these possibilities for each team, colors with a lot of freedom, and then, but I am absolutely in terms of concepts. No, I call myself like a conceptual carnavalesca because actually I'm not a person that goes dancing anywhere or participate in the psychedelic. So, and we have in our history like Elio Chisica, no, like the artists that he is picking up, like that have used as a reference to these possibilities that this pop.
Yeah, kind of the
party manifestation, no? Tropics in general, tropicalia,
yeah,
no? In the
tropicalia.
music, we have two different possibilities of also thinking about. There's a tropicalia that touch exactly the same thing, and also bossa nova, no? This is a how to say, like walking along the beach. Is, I would say, that inspire me every time I can think about bossa nova. I can think about a walk along the beach, what it is, my experience as a person.
and you know, and Tropicalia was, you know, a pop music. It was it's Caetano Velosa and Gilberto Gil mixing pop, U.S. kind of pop music and rock and roll with kind of African rhythms, and you know, creating in the late 60s like a very you know, dynamic sort of mixture of these influences. And Elio Chisica was, you know, named this installation kind of after that, or in relationship to that, and kind of created this kind of tropical environment that you could enter into. And then Mariposa, you know, is also kind of very, you know, tropical in the way that sort of mixing all these different layering flowers and beads. And this is the painting I always think of with Carmen Miranda. And
he likes Carmen Miranda.
And she talks about Carmen Miranda as a reference in these, but maybe not this one in particular. But that comes from you. Okay. That wasn't.
No, I love Carmen Miranda.
Yeah. And then this has kind of a similar palette, or some of the similar imageries, but this painting, Beleza Pura, is like very large in scale, and quite, you know, the horizontal format starts taking on kind of an architectural feel to it. And maybe you could talk about some of what was happening at this moment with the painting.
Yeah, in 2004, I started making this. So until 96 I was just painter, and then in 96 I start making prints, actually in a studio that Durham Press, like in Pennsylvania, here in US. And so and then in 2003 I start making collages of paper on paper, And then in 2004, I start making installations for buildings, like of course dealing with the architecture, mostly almost everything to museums. This one specifically, it will not done for a museum. It was a Gloucester Road Station, London, that I had this temporary installation. So when you when that starts, and I did the first one in 2004 for Selfridge department store in Manchester, UK. It was 7 floors building, and and I needed to, of course, work on an architectural plan, and then handmade drawing, because everything I do is handmade. But this drawing needed to become a digital drawing, and then to be able to blow up. The material I use there is adhesive vinyl, that's cut out adhesive vinyl, not printed, and apply it, on the site, on the vinyl. So this process of working on an architectural plan, I make a change, introduce a very big change on the way I could make my drawings. This is a Fondation Cartier, when I had a show at the Fondation Cartier pour l'Art Contemporain in 2009. And in there, I had a kind of a small survey where I had these gigantic collages, like 5 meters high for 4 meters width. And I had this, I did too, because for the ones that don't know, the building is a kind of a glass box, so we needed to develop, so everything was designed for the show, including the walls. And then I did a project for both windows, the front and the back windows facade. So the arrival of this possibility brought, when I coming back to my painting process in the studio, introduce new possibilities of the drawing. So this painting, Beleza Pura, is a painting that has examples on how some areas became more simple, in simple drawings, and also has these I call pucci balls, because it's the name I give to some of these circles or balls sometimes, where I make drawings inside, and it's connected with the pucci design. It's just because looking at his earlier works always motivates me to do some things like that. And the composition also starts being more geometric, more clearly geometric.
Let's move to this painting.
Go ahead. Yeah, you jump.
No, these are also, this painting's a very large scale painting. I think what's interesting about this is here we have the same form that early on in the 90s was like, they were necklaces, they looked like pearls, and then they're targets, in other paintings, and here they're just kind of abstract explosions, and
yeah.
And it's a motif that continues.
Dizzying. So the circle has been the center of, like, in terms of geometric shapes, and of course it's change every stage, every moment, group of works I've done. And so in a certain moment, the ones that before in the 90s were based sometimes in like a pearls necklace, and then I did, or maybe some aboriginal kind of drawing, and then became dots, circle that has composed by dots, and then this link kind of a movement that also I've been interested. So my compositions, I like Color is what making the composition happen. And I only say, oh, this painting is finished when the combinations or the constructions of the colors I feel are really working. But times and times I introduce different aspects in terms of new questions for the work, like a kind of some elements that will start developing like a chain reaction, no, makes other things happen. So in this, the circle is like starting, then self moving and building up this kind of disturbing for your eyes. This painting, so I have the circles, then I introduce later on the stripes. I always, in the way, like I don't like the idea of have a center for your eyes or stop your eyes. I want to keep the movement. Of course, the circle is the most organic, and I'll read something that moves, no? So it's difficult to introduce straight lines. So later on, I introduce the stripes, and then squares, because finally I could understand that colors would make everything move anyway. So I didn't need it just to have a shape that has organic movement, but I could have something more static that would move based on the application of color, no, on the structure of colors.
And
these,
Go ahead. No. And what helped in that thinking process
exactly.
was Bridget Riley. No?
Exactly. When I saw the retrospective of Bridget Riley, this British master from the op art, really physical, and at the same time it was just stripes. And then I suddenly understood. Well, of course, colors is what make it happen, no. And then I introduced the stripes with color in the work.
Yeah, this is 2002. When was the Bridget Riley show? Do you remember?
2001.
Yeah.
But actually,
you want to go ahead?
No.
Okay.
This is the first group of collages, papers on paper. So I use, and I still do, to collect wrappers paper from chocolate and candies. So I like to collect it. And
what provoked you? I mean, I think it's, as you said, and I sometimes forget that your early work was dealt with found materials like fabric and some paper, but why in 2003, why did you turn to actual collage? Because it was always a surprise for me.
Because I was living with these papers, and I think these papers is like has totally a complete connection what my interest, because they come, of course, from the pop culture. When you think about developing a graphic design for chocolate wrapper, it should be intense, it should be alive, has strong colors, and it's something that it needs to attract the consumer, and afterwards to eat it too. And
the pleasure of eating.
Yeah, the pleasure of eating, the forbidden thing. Nobody can really eat so many chocolates or candies. And so these combinations of things made me, of course, like to collect and have these papers. And then I use just for personal things, cards. But looking at them, I start having more interest. And one certain moment, to just go back to work with some existing materials, that I had stopped at that moment a long time ago, and listen these materials. And then when the Domenic Erguignac, Frédéric Paul was the director at French Curator, invite me to have this survey show at the Centre Domenico Erguignac Centre d'Art Contemporain in Brittany in 2003. He offered me a residence along the time, like while the works were arrived and so I stayed there 2 weeks, and then I decided to take all my collection from Rio to Brittany and stop thinking and really work and make a work on collage.
I remember you talked. I remember this period, and it was right after the 2002 biennial where you presented gigantic paintings. Like it was a period. It was right after a period.
It was the 2003 biennial, is that
Yeah, right.
Venice biennial? Okay, I represent. Yeah.
And it was after this real moment
Yeah.
of intense painting, you
Yeah.
know. And so they were kind of a way. You talk about them as a way to kind of be more relaxed.
Yeah, because I was I represent Brazil in the 2003 biennial, Venice biennial, and so I had this gigantic work. Some are here actually, and yeah, and also like. After the experience, after starting work with prints, I understood too that I could not only paint. And paint is like something like takes a lot of your energy and takes it for you to keep the quality, the interest on what you do. You should stop at certain moments. As all my process is always very slowly, not only because of the technical part, but also because of the time that the works need to have, and I need to have too. So I'm a lucky person that I could develop using all the mediums, all the kind of mediums, no skills, like to keep thinking about the work, to keep developing interest for my work, and interest for myself, and not to really stop. Otherwise, I would need it to really stop. So the collage, I think, arrived. It was a kind of a more intimacy. You know, I have these papers. I was already thinking, and then I had this opportunity. I said, this is a good moment. And after that, because after a certain moment, these change of mediums, one start to interfere another, and many times at the beginning they just brought things or took things from the painting process, but then they started also interfering. Start like send some information to the painting process too. So it became very rich, this exchange that I mentioned before about the buildings projects, and now the collage. So this painting actually was developed after have all this square. So some of the symbols and imagery and elements I had used before, I put them in the squares. And I juxtaposed there, I don't know, more than 100 kind of a juxtaposition, and have this big flower in the center that actually you would say, oh, you just said that you don't want centers. But I think like this, all I've done with different forms or shapes, or that paintings that has a center, but in such an intense way that actually it keeps your eyes in moving anyway, and you don't really privilege any of these areas.
One of the things you'll see in the exhibition is she starts using paper, these collages in 2003, and then in the show you'll start seeing more collage coming in, because my interest with the show is really to focus on the core of her painting practice, but as you sort of look at the whole body of her work, you really start to see at this time the collage is starting to generate the imagery in the painting. So sort of the materials that she was using here, the chocolate wrappers, start kind of creating this kind of quilt pattern that then you start seeing like represented in the paintings. And then, in a painting like Avenida Brasil, you start seeing sort of those kind of collage elements mixing with the previous line interests, the patterning.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, yeah.
No, this painting is just, this painting is a good example when I start using it like a musical score as a reference to my work in the studio. So in the painting. So, and that painting is a good example where I put all together some of the elements I've been using before, like the stripes, squares, like the circle, like the putty balls I call, and like some of the targets, and make a kind of musical score with all. So the written, like I never really had used before as really thinking objectively to have it as a composition, but then that starts. Then this is 2004 painting, and it started that time too.
And these kind of squares, and they start sort of talking about a grid, and this painting sort of starts to evoke kind of urban space and this idea of rhythm and music and urban space kind of very much in dialogue with Mondrian.
Mondrian was another, like if I would say like three big and reference to my work, I'll say Tarsila, Matisse, and Mondrian later on, and of course some contemporary.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit more of what you take from Mondrian, because he's so linear and you're so circular.
I think it's exactly this kind of cross and intensity. It's maybe like a map, a kind of urban map, and how things could be active and based on different kind of correspondence,
But your urban space is always Rio, or it's always a tropical urban space.
Yeah, maybe, exactly.
I mean, here similar painting in terms of the energy and sort of this the emphasis on line, but these sort of undulating lines here that she uses quite a bit. They have a direct relationship to Burlo Marx, the designer who did the sidewalks in Copacabana. And you're actually participating in a show.
The stripes start receiving a kind of a curve, and also these 2007 important, like it could. This graphic thing, solid, that I talk about the spaces, when I start doing these drawings for spaces, for site specifics, it's a very, like from these 2007, 2008, 9, I really, my work for 3 or 4 years gain a very almost graphic and solid,
very
more
flat,
clear structure.
Very flat use of paint.
Yeah, there you still have this curving, drizzling, and a kind of a no stop, but then they start being more constructed, as we have also
and this corner is quite transparent, and you see again sort of the influence of these window projects.
This is one of the same kind of a site specific, then using lights, so you could see like the natural light that I did at the Pinacoteca do Estado de São Paulo is like maybe the biggest contemporary art museum working in Brazil now in São Paulo. So I did. They developed a survey about my work in 2008, and for a room that have 10 of these windows, I really work thinking about the natural light and the kind of a stained glass, and works like that, yeah.
And you see that in this painting too. So
yeah,
the
this
flatness.
is a very exactly example of
triptych.
this flatness, and that comes and. 2010 painted, no, 2009, 9 then, because I started in the 9 and finished in the 10, is a very important example for this time.
And then this is a very powerful little painting, and I juxtapose it in the show with a collage that has a similar format, just to sort of talk about they're really starting to dialogue back and forth.
Exactly.
And the kind of papers and ribbons and stickers that you're using that exist, these are ready-made things that she's collaging together, start really sort of generating ideas in the paintings.
Yeah, the juxtaposition. So I think it is from that moment, 2009, 10, this intent, I made like a kind of immediately bridge to the abstract art in itself becomes a strong reference to my work. So master from the abstract art, like Sonia Delaunay, Cruz Diaz.
We have Sonia
here.
Yeah, go on.
Sonia Delaunay, Cruz Diaz, Soto, Valdemar Cordeiro, Brazilian, so Ione Saldanha, what is a painter. So a Brazilian, very important painter from the 50s and 60s, and also she worked until the 80s. And so very important references, as I really been using some of their elements in the painting. So the stripes and curves became a kind of grid, or how to say note, like this word that I never remember. So I start building up the colors with like juxtapositions of different kind of sometimes the stripes, sometimes other paintings, other patterns, and make this dialogue between my own interest and the abstract art in itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very important painting. A lot of transition elements that start. This is 2011, 2012, and you can see this was sort of in the rest of the exhibition. After this, you see a lot of these themes, these visual motifs being played out in different ways. At the center, you have these dense lines that very much remind us of Cruz Diaz or Soto, but then you also have these new shapes that very much recall Matisse again. Matisse did this beautiful chapel in Vence in France late in his life, where he was making these stained glass windows, and you had already been doing stained glass windows. You were already interested in Matisse, and now these interests start crossing and kind of generating new forms.
Yeah, exactly.
And just an example of Carlos Cruz Diaz, his kind of optical, his play with optical effects.
Yeah, the optical, like you could see at the Bridge Raleigh, that we already have seen. So I always had this very strong interest in the optical possibility, and then it's like it became more intense in the more recently works.
Like this painting
and
is
like kinetic, the kinetic art also, like from South American one.
What's important to remember here, though, I mean, this is an incredible painting. It's so dense, it's like a basket of woven lines. But this is still the transfer technique. She's still working with this technique, and all of this is first laid on acrylic sheets and then kind of, glued onto the canvas and ripped off. This painting,
it's a long process. It's very long, and I went back to from this more solid graphic, a kind of a clean, if you can call it, where the colors were like the yellow was yellow, red was red. I revisit my rough surfaces and my this technique I use working with the clear plastic sheet. Like I could have some memory, because sometimes I use the same sheets as for a long time, so it keeps its own memory and it keeps its own process. Some reminding, some remind or
kind of bits and memories of previous. Sometimes she works on paintings for 10 years, and she comes back to them and reuses the same motifs that she had planned for an earlier painting. I mean, in this case, there are 3 new paintings that she created specifically to premiere here, and this is one of them. and this is like the largest of the three, actually. And
this is a kind of a real meeting between different kinds of things that I'm interested in now, and so it's very good that we have in this museum, like very good for me too, like to see in the museum like all this, the room where I can have all together from 2009 to the very recent one in the same room, and see how the things has been.
Intense room.
Yeah, yeah, quite intense, exactly.
I mean, I think the thing that's interesting for the show, or kind of experiencing the show, is here we are at sort of the end of the show and the most recent work, and we've come very far from the early work, but there are things that are similar. You know, the kind of, you know, many circles, many different you know, focal points, but then and the show allows you to kind of slowly kind of go through this transition, and you're sort of surprised where you end up from where you came from. And I'm sure it, as you,
I'm very in a very important moment. Now I'm working on my collage, because after this first experience in Brittany, when I went back to the studio, I needed to organize, to set a studio for me to continue to work with collage. So, and I have 3 houses in the same street now, that each one has its own part, a studio prepared for me to work. But when I'm working on a collage, I'm working on a collage. When I'm working on paints, I'm working on paints, and the prints I make here in the US. And so I never work on both. So I'm pretty...
and you still work on the same street in Jardim
Botânico.
Botânico.
Since ever, yeah.
Why don't we open it up to questions? We'll take some questions. Can we have the lights go up a little bit? And we have a microphone, so make sure you speak into the microphone, because we are recording. So we just want to make sure she can hear, and that and we can all have a conversation. Okay, there's one up there. Yeah. There's another one over here, down in the front somewhere.
Okay, well.
Beatriz, what are the source of your titles? For example, the one that's up there now.
Yeah. So the titles, I think they has no real connection with the works. So it's like it's a kind of another collection that I have about the words in itself, that could mean some words that I like, or represent some places that it's very much connected with the words in itself, or how it meaning something for me. Not really meaning for me in terms of I had because I like some names of cities, like Americana is a city in São Paulo. I never been in Americana, and I didn't have any experience there, but I like this name, Americana. And then that is the word in itself. So I collect these things, and then I untitle the works, looking at it. But this happened with the paintings, and the prints also has a kind of the same attitude, but for the collage, no, because in a way, like in the collages, I work with existing materials, so I think I needed to respect the fact that I didn't invented everything, so it was like has papers, has information there, and I need to respect it. And so normally all the collages has titles that if you look in the collage you find, or is a brand, or is like the title of some thing. The most recent ones, I'm stopping using the wrapper papers, the wrapped chocolate papers. So I probably will start having the same kind of possibility that I do for my paintings. The site-specific too is different context in the way is somewhere. When I did the subway station, so I was in London. It was a very important station, London, and the title of this project is Peace and Love, because of course I connected with the strong movement that was really developed first in London. So it has a reason, has a kind of explanation for the title there.
Good afternoon. I just want to say that I'm very proud to have a Brazilian here representing so well Brazil. Thank you so much. I'm also a Brazilian and I'm a big fan. I'd like to know this technique that you developed, the transferring technique, is this something that you developed yourself or something you learned? And how did you get there?
No, I developed myself. Never thought that I had invented it because you never know. Well, I'm arriving at that point that I may have invented in a way I do, because when my work started entering international important museums all over the world, so many times the conservators want me to explain them, and I haven't seen, but I develop it in my own, in my studio, yeah.
Other questions? There's one, yeah. There's another one here. Yeah.
I heard you mention that you don't sketch before you work, and I was wondering the way of working that you mentioned a lot of times that is very rational, but is as well like intuitional, like you are working there and you position the things, and when you feel it's okay, it's like rational but intuitional at the same time, or you sketch in a way like...
Yeah, it's a good question, because sometimes it's a good, the words are very difficult. Like, I think like visual works are visual experience, you know, and then you needed to see, and you needed to, if it's possible, to really develop a kind of I don't know, text or context that comes from this visual experience. So in my case, painting is, you needed to dialogue with the painting, but it's a kind of a visual communication, you know? It's not, it's a kind of a visual communication. It's not something that you would really place in words. Otherwise, you probably will be difficult for you to really make it happen successfully, you know. When I say successfully, it's for yourself, you know, for what you want as a result. My work is very rational. It's like it's a construction. Of course, there are a lot of intuition. The process is very processed, so I don't make sketch like I said before. But each result, each decision, it is based not on expression or feeling or a movement. It has is a rational decision. You understand? Like it's like I could because it's always a dialogue between you and the painting. So you needed to listen to the painting, and you needed to introduce some things, but you needed to also listen it. Because if it's an imposition from your side, if you impose things to the painting, probably you will never really finish. And the other way around is the same. When the painting is too much strong, it's too strong, and it starts smashing you. It's not a good point as well. So it's like, it's always a dialogue, a difficult, very difficult dialogue.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say I'm so excited that you're here and that your paintings are here. I'm a huge fan. I adore your paintings. I think I can look at them for hours and hours and not stop. So thank you so much for giving us that. And I also paint, and you inspire me in so many ways. Speaking you here, talking about your technique, it was very important for me to hear the transfer process, and I know that it's a very complicated technique, but I have a few questions if you don't mind. Do you use a gel medium to transfer the acrylic, the acrylic paint onto the canvas, or your?
It's an acrylic medium.
It is.
Yeah.
And the other question is, when you, again, you mentioned that you don't sketch, and we keep wondering how you come up with these amazing compositions. Do you actually paint directly on your on the acrylic that you use to transfer, or
The plastic sheet.
on the plastic sheet? Exactly.
Yeah, yes, direct on plastic. I paint direct on canvas too.
You do
know?
also.
Sometimes some of these stripes I did directly, especially on the early work like this crochet I did direct. So
Yeah.
there are some washing and some colors. So it's, but most of them I make on the plastic sheet. So yeah, so I paint directly on it, and then afterwards when it's complete, because I need to make a film.
Of course.
You know, to be thicker enough for me afterward to apply it. It's always, I always work with dry paint, because I think that it is the difference between the monotype process. When you work with wet paint, is a dry paint. And also the work, because you can also make films on glass. And then the glass, like a very hard glass or plexi, like a hard surface. And then take it out from there and glue it. So the difference here is also like I apply with everything, and then when it's dry, I peel off the plastic. So I read it off.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question about that? Like, because there's so much rationality involved, what is it that you like about the imperfections, or about in the transfer technique? What do you like about the bits and pieces and the edges and all of that, you know?
Yeah, I like the layering. I like that it is a process, you know, that was my big challenge when I did this, that I mentioned before, when I did this project about the seasons for the Fundação Baila. I decided to do it based on the seasons, because I always like the difference of seasons. So I like they always motivate me, like winter, summer, that spring. And so I decided to do, because it's a very traditional also collection, one that's the biggest in the world, about modern art. So the seasons has been also a traditional theme for artists in general. And so I decided to develop it. And then I realized I needed to make sketch. Otherwise, I could not really be loyal to the project. And so when I finish all my drawings, and then I start, they are gigantic paintings. Like it's in the total, the four make like a 15 meters painting, and then 3 meters high, all same height. And so the first, like when I project, so I have the drawings, I need to project them onto the canvas, and then start painting. When I had all the drawing there, I look and I said, well, what I'm gonna do that now, you know, that needed to become a painting. No, it needs to be not just put colors on this original drawing. It needs to become a painting, and that was a very, very difficult moment for me. So how to keep the drawing, the original, so the idea have like for summer, no? And all the colors, I have like a kind of a colors palette selection I have done. How to combine all that and make a painting, no? And then I understood why I like process, no? Because it's difficult to separate, like this is rational, this is institutional, it's very difficult to separate. But I like a process, I like that things comes like from my, maybe spontaneity, I don't know, happens, but that needs to fit in a very rational process.
One of the things that
Make rational decisions, or make rational structure.
I think something that's beautiful about the imperfections is sort of this, I mean, the paintings really strive for beauty, and there's a balance in them, and there's an order in them, but then the imperfection, these sort of bits and pieces sort of make them very human, and very, like, you notice that they're handmade, and so they become, you know,
And
very...
that
very,
is a very, very interesting point. No, yeah, that you were pointing out. Very important, actually, is because I always, like, my interest when I talk about folk art, primitive art, applied art. So the stronger point of my interest in that, it was, I think, through the decorative art, applied art, all this kind of art is the possibility. You could write about all humanity history through that, and also these moments of intimacy and these interests that make something more beautiful for you, for your life. So you don't need to have a designed glass to drink water. You don't need it to have like your body with like the Indians does, like to have all independent of the spiritual, or it's something for your soul, it's something for your well-being. It's not that you need it for your surviving things. And so it's, I always love handmade. So it's something that I like to keep on my work, is this possibility of the handmade that is there. So it's a strange, no, it's a strange combination. But
Just one more question then? Yeah.
Again, I'm Brazilian and very proud to be here. Just maybe to finish more on a personal note, you're a successful Brazilian artist, female. What words of wisdom do you have to share from this experience, and that maybe other artists or the audience can, you know, learn from you on?
Example.
well, I don't know. I think I'm very proud that I can represent well Brazil, and I never thought, like, when I start, like, I would become that big or famous internationally, that I became finally an international art. And but I think it's always a very strong, interesting, and rich experience to be all over the world. At the same time, go back to Rio. It's an important point for me.
Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you.